Okay, welcome to the licensing subcommittee, looking at the club certificate application for Old Emanuel RFC Limited. First order of business is for the councillors to nominate and appoint a chair for the meeting. Could I have a nomination, please, councillors?
Can I please nominate Councillor Caroline Charles to chair this subcommittee?
And is that seconded, Councillor Mercer?
It certainly is.
And are you happy to chair, Councillor Charles?
Yes, I am.
Over to you, ma'am. Right.
Okay. Yes. So welcome to everyone to this meeting. The first item on the agenda is, are there any declarations of pecuniary interest?
No.
Right.
No.
No. Okay, that's good. Right. Okay, so you've all received the subcommittee hearing procedures, a copy of which was included in the notice and agenda pack sent to all parties. So we'll be following those procedures. I'd like to ask the legal advisor to inform those present that the subcommittee had a briefing prior to the hearing to confirm the procedure and for clarification on any aspect of the application, please.
Yes, the committee had a pre-meet where they read the papers and considered the salient points. No legal advice is provided in those meetings. It's just for them to understand the application and what it involves.
Right, and I'd also like to ask the legal advisor to confirm the process for questioning and whether there had been any request for adjournments.
No adjournments as far as I'm aware, and obviously the procedure sets out the process of who speaks in what order.
Right, thank you. And I'd like to ask the licensing officer if there are any technical issues that need to be brought to the attention of those present at the meeting.
Thank you, Chair. As no technical issues as such, maybe it would just be worth clarifying that this is a club premises certificate application, which involves the supply of alcohol. Being a club certificate, it differs slightly from a normal licence that would be granted, in that alcohol can only be supplied to members of the club or their guests.
Right, thank you for that. So it's now, I now ask the applicant to present their case. Questions can then be asked of the applicant by the responsible authorities and interested parties and members of the subcommittee. So, yes, so if you'd like to present your case, please, Mr. Hearson.
Thank you, Councillor. Old Emanuel RFC are an amateur sports club that have recently taken over occupation of the clubhouse at Rains Park Sports Ground. We spent a significant amount of capital funds on the renovation of it to bring it back into use as a community sports facility. Part of that is to renovate the bar, which was previously used by, I think it was described as Rains Park Sports Club. And we need to make an application, as we have done so far, for a club certificate authorising the supply of alcohol to our members and their guests. The application sets out the conditions that we feel comply with the licensing objectives. Of course, we're willing to look at any other reasonable conditions the councillors may feel appropriate. Shortly after we made the application, we received notification that there had been 4 objections, mostly in relation to the late licensing hours. As a result of that, we proposed amended hours, so Monday to Friday until 11, Saturday until 12, and Sunday until 10:30. We notified local residents by a mail drop in Somerset, Camberley and Taunton Avenues of that decision. And we also scheduled a town hall meeting for the 18th of March. Regrettably, that was on very short notice, but that's unfortunately a product of the club being run by volunteers. We heard about the objections on the Thursday, had a committee meeting on the Monday, and sent the notifications out on the Tuesday and Wednesday. Not all of the residents received those mail drop notifications because some of the residents had no junk mail notices on their letterboxes, so we didn't feel it was appropriate to deliver it to them. But most of the residents would hopefully receive those notifications. at that meeting on the 18th of March, we took account of the concerns expressed by residents, most of which would either relate to traffic, which we've taken some measures to address, and also their concern that the licensing hours shouldn't be later than the club license at Old Wimbledonians, which is only a short distance away. We undertook to the residents to vary those hours. So that is a point, I think, which we need to address now, is that although our application is technically until 12 midnight on Saturdays, the Old Wimbledonians license is only until 11 o'clock on Saturdays. And so we're only seeking a license on Saturdays until 11 p.m. so that our licensing hours are no later than Old Wimbledonians. The other concern that was suggested or raised by the residents is they didn't want people out on the grassy areas late at night in the summer. So we would not oppose a restriction, for example, that prevented the supply of alcohol to people consuming on the grassy areas after, for example, 9:30 p.m. to make sure that that doesn't interfere with nearby residents. In terms of the occupation of the site, whilst we were renovating and taking over and using the sports ground but unable to use the bar, we held a number of BYO events where people brought their own drinks to consume, and there were no problems with that. A couple of the residents have perfectly legitimately expressed concern that, well, they didn't know that was happening, so if there were complaints, we didn't necessarily note that they related to your use of the clubhouse or our use of the clubhouse. Since the residents have filed their objections, there have been 3 further events. There was the clubhouse opening on the 11th of March. We had a wake for one of our members whose wife's passed away, at which there were approximately 300 people on the 10th of March. And I think it was the 7th of April, my 40th birthday celebration was held at the clubhouse, and we've had no complaints from residents about any of those events, which I hope demonstrates that we are a responsible proposed licensee. It's probably easier if I was to address any concerns the councillors may have in relation to those objections going forward.
Right, thank you. And Mrs. Key, do you have any questions to ask of the applicant?
Sorry, I was just taking a while to unmute. I don't have any questions, no. And my only objection was the late Saturday evening closing time, because I live really close. And I remember 10 years ago when it was occupied, there was quite a lot of noise of people waiting for taxis outside my house. That's been resolved, and I've met the people from Old Emanuel's who came along to one of the open days, and I just thought, yeah, what a great job they've done. So I don't really have any objections, but I do know that a number of residents are really tearing their hair out about this. And it just seems strange that none of them have attended. You know, some very, very detailed comments from some of the residents who are really, really concerned. I don't really know what they expect to happen if they're not going to turn up. So that's just my sort of quite surprising point, really. You know, I was thinking that I might have to sort of almost mediate today to try and you know, convince residents that it's not really going to be a big issue. Honestly, if they feel that strongly about it and they're not here, then, you know, I don't really know what more could be done to consider the points that they've raised. Was there any plan to go through some of the issues raised and the grounds for which people objected?
Mr. Hearson, do you have anything to add to that?
No, I think we've done all that we can to address the concerns that have been raised by the residents. I can't say that the risk of there being disturbance is zero, but hopefully it is as close to zero as we can possibly make it. If there are any issues with residents, we will deal with them swiftly. Old Emanuel intend on being a community club for those residents for as long as we possibly can. So it's in our interest, both in terms of our membership and in terms of retaining our license, to address those concerns.
And I feel reassured as well by some of the things that that have come back in terms of, you know, there's going to be a on-call person who's at the bar every evening that we can call. Some of the residents have said, oh, well, I bet they won't answer the phone. You know, you've said you're going to put signs up, you know, you're going to encourage people to leave quietly. The residents go, oh, well, they're not going to read those. And I don't know. I'm just in shock today, to be honest, because, as I say, there was so much, I mean, pages and pages of reasons why the club should not be there or should not sell alcohol, and it should only be there for people playing sport, and it needs to be for the children and the elderly and the residents. And, you know, there's going to be a mass exodus of families from the road. All these things were written. And anyway, I'll stop there because there's probably not much more I can say, really.
Right, and so our legal advisor, Mr. Bishop, wants to make a point.
I nearly went muted there.
Yeah.
I was just going to reassure Mrs. Kay in terms of the representations that have been put in. The committee still has the ability, well, will still consider them and has to. So certainly, if they're not speaking, at least the representations will be considered.
Yeah, I mean, I personally think that some of the representations are a bit over the top, and people are just very sort of paranoid and you know, unreasonably expecting the whole road to be silent 24/7 when they moved into the area. I've been here for nearly 30 years, but people that have moved into the area within the last 10 years probably didn't even realise there was a sports club at the end of the road, because they lived much further the other end of the road, and now it's like, you know, it's all terrible. So I think I'd urge you to consider some of those objections in I don't know, just in terms of reasonableness, because I think that some of the things that have been, it's all speculation, a lot of it in my view, and that, you know, children won't be able to sleep at night because there's going to be rowdy rugby players singing on the road all night. But, you know, there's all those things that have been mentioned, and there's also the distrust of the club. And one of my points that I'd like to say is that I think for the residents that it's better that there's a responsible tenant occupier of the ground and the clubhouse, rather than a derelict building, which has been the case. And that did encourage antisocial behaviour. So the measures that the club have already taken and will continue to make, I think, will mitigate some of the problems that we had, particularly in lockdown and, you know, when there was more people out and about. And I think that's what people are concerned about, that it's going to be worse. But I personally think that the type of people that will attend the club will be not like the sort of young people that were making a noise when we had nobody occupying the sports ground.
Right, thank you. And do the councillors have any questions they wish to ask of the applicant?
I have several questions, Caroline, if I can put some of them.
Yes, on you go, Councillor Mercer.
Thank you. I used to play five-a-side football on the pitches, which are at the bottom of the area outlined by the application. So, and I used to drink in the club when it was being used. I know there was some petty crime on what's now the cycle path at the bottom of there that used to be happening. And I imagine, because obviously I've not been playing football during COVID because it was closed, I imagine that's got worse. So you have my sympathy, Mrs. Kay. So I'm familiar with the old club that was there. So in that context, we've got a couple of questions. I think the fact, Mr. Hearsom, that you've said you're happy to adjust the application to 11 o'clock on a Saturday, I think I was going to make exactly the same point, that I think it's almost untenable for you to argue that you should have different times of opening from the old Wimbledonians club. If that's accepted, can we just take that as read now? Is that, I don't know, Tony, is that something we can just assume on the application now?
The application is amended in that sense, yes.
Okay.
Just one clarification, Mr. Hearsom, if you can just clarify. In terms of the opening hour on a Saturday, I'm assuming you're saying that's 11 or 11:30. What are you saying?
Effectively, half an hour's drinking up time. So if we're limiting it to 11, the closing time of the premises would be 11:30.
Fine. Okay.
Thank you. Okay, so that's a good point. You also mentioned we'd identified, I think, in the prior discussion that it was interesting that your application was for such a large area, and it wasn't clear to us why you would need to have the whole area of all the pitches covered by the license application. Do you want to give us any information on that?
Sure. So the reason why we included the grounds as part of the license was to enable people to take a drink to watch the matches taking place if they wanted to. We're currently in discussion with our partner, the Wimbledon Club, and Merton and Sports England and the RFU about how we would lay out the various pitches. So we're not in a position currently to say that alcohol already be consumed on pitch 1 or next to pitch 2 or however it is. But there's certainly no intention that there would be late consumption of alcohol on the grassy areas. It's simply that people can take their drinks from the clubhouse to watch the matches that are taking part.
Yeah, sorry, Councillor Charles, do you want Mrs. Kay to speak?
Yes, Mrs. Kay, would you like to come in now?
Yeah, just on that point, in the, I guess, defence of the club, when there was no club there was a lot of drinking on the grounds by cricketers at whatever time, and a lot of rubbish left behind. So with the club coming in and making this more regulated, in that, you know, you can only buy drinks from the bar and they will dispose of any rubbish, it's actually going to be more bearable. Particularly a Thursday night, there was a lot of cricket on, and there was quite a lot of outdoor drinking till pretty late. So I always used to get woken up on a Thursday night last summer because people were drinking outside. And then when I went to walk the dog on a Friday on the field, it was full of empty cans. So I just like to say that that problem that I experienced last year is going to be eliminated, because, as Matthew said, it's going to be much more regulated, and that the club will be responsible for making sure people are inside and making sure people don't leave rubbish around.
Thank you. So so in relation to the area, I suppose I'm wondering whether we might be able to have some sort of condition, Mr. Hearson, or variation, so that, for example, the license wouldn't allow a large marquee to be put up in the middle of the day and have lots of drinking, because that's not in your intention, from what I understand. It seems that you're talking about understandable desire to have a pint on the side of a pitch. That's quite different from having a large marquee in the middle and having 400 people having a drink. So I wonder if we might agree something which restricts it a little bit, so that that sort of event isn't included in what you're applying for. The other point on the area, just strictly looking at the area, I've got in front of me on the side of the screen, I've got the map and the area identified, and my recollection is that the premises backs onto a number of well, I can see on the map, backs onto a number of residents' properties, but there was never any use of the premises to have drinks at the back of the building, and yet you've included that area in your map of the licensed area, so that might allow an energetic new bar manager that comes in to say, oh, wouldn't it be nice to have drinks at the back, when they would be directly next to the residents' premises. And I'm wondering if we mightn't ask for that line to be redrawn so that the licensed area doesn't include the back of the building. Can you give me your comments on that?
So firstly, in relation to the point about the marquee, there's certainly no intention of running those sorts of events. We have the hall inside the premises. If we were going to run those sorts of events, it would have to be the subject of a separate temporary event notice, I think. So I would have no objection to a condition that prevented anything more than the pitch side points that you were discussing. On the second point you make, the reason why we used that plan was because it was part of the original survey with the red line marked on it. There's certainly no intention to sell alcohol to the back of the premises. In fact, that would be impossible because there are a number of large containers currently parked there for storage of equipment. So I'd certainly have no objection to modifying the plan, perhaps to run so that the grassy area would run in front of the pavilion and include the pavilion.
Yeah, thank you. So that would be my another related remark. I think if we're saying, as you've suggested, a time of 9:30 that you would limit outdoor drinking to, we would want the plan to be amended to indicate the area which you would then be allowed to drink within. I can see where it is. It's the area of drive directly in front of the building. So, but I think it's still good to limit it in some way, make clear that area that you're including. If you're including the whole of that drive, left and right, or you're just putting it in front of the building, I would say if you made it just in front of the actual building, that would be a confined and reasonable area. If you stretch it all the way down to the right-hand side as you're looking out of the building, you're then actually a few yards away from a resident's garden. So I would suggest that that would probably not be acceptable. Any comments?
Is to the north part of the site as I'm looking at it, where it backs onto the rear of Somerset Avenue.
Yes, that's right, to the north part of the site. As I say, if you when you're looking out from the pavilion towards the pitches as a whole, you've got the drive extends down what, as you say, is to the north, to the right-hand side, and it also extends left to the other side of the bowling green. And I would say that really you should be limiting the area that people are still able to drink, literally to where the drive comes down, where it's indicated brown on the map, and there's a dotted line there. And I would say also it should probably only extend to where the physical building is, and not the sort of storage areas and so on, which are to the north of that area.
Yes. So
maybe I can assist. So the way maybe Tony Hawks might chime in here, but maybe what you can do is agree that a slightly revised plan is submitted in the next day or so, just to allow those changes to be included.
Yeah, I would be happy with that. And once the certificate is granted, if you were to grant a certificate, the plan becomes attached to it. Yeah. So any change to the plan after that point would require a variation. Yeah. So you could either deal with it through conditions, to specifying conditions, so what areas can and can't be used, or
the revised plan would have to get to the committee, to us, to the emails that you've been communicating with, obviously before the decision is published, so that they can be within the decision to reflect the changes the committee and you have agreed.
Okay, thanks. I don't have any further question. Councillor Charles.
Mrs. Kay, would you like to ask a question?
I was just going to say that would be really reassuring in terms of the outdoor noise. I look out my window and I can actually see where some of the areas that you were just talking about. So that would certainly reassure me, and probably my two neighbours that are even closer, and also the Somerset residents. I don't know if it's worth making this point now, but following on from any final decision, I just think it'd be really good to communicate with the residents and maybe give as much notice as possible to a meeting, just to say, look, this is in place now. Here's what we've agreed. Here's what we're going to do. If people don't turn up, then they need to shut up, to be honest. But I just think, the more that you can offer that to the residents, then hopefully they're not going to hassle councillors and council officers. I'm a council officer myself. I work in Future Merton. I know it can be really tricky as an officer when you get constant complaints from residents, but then they've not even taken the time to speak to the other party about the issue. So, the more that you can talk to us all to reassure us and take on any views and make any changes, then I think that will hopefully run smoothly.
Well, we've got a pledge to undertake quarterly meetings. The last one would have been the town hall we did on the 18th of March. So the next one would be in June. I think at our next committee meeting, we'll finalise the date of that and publicise it as far in advance as possible.
Yeah, I mean, I think maybe specifically the things that we've talked about today would be of interest, particularly confirming the Saturday night closing and confirming the areas for the outside drinking, and the things that you're not intending to do, like the big. I hadn't really thought of the big marquee thing, but it's a really valid point that you know, residents can be reassured that there won't be lots of outdoor partying going on a regular basis. Thank you.
Councillor Welton, do you have anything to add?
No, I have no further points to add. I think they've all been answered.
Right, and does anyone else have anything to add at this? Oh yes, Mr. Hearson. Yeah.
Apologies, I just wanted to clarify Councillor Mercer's comments on the plans, just so I can have the corrected one drawn. So it's all of the areas behind the front elevation of the pavilion, which is absolutely fine. And then we would draw the line to exclude the brown access way that runs to the right up to the grassy field, and then perhaps some sort of exclusion area for the properties that back on from Somerset Avenue. I just wanted to get a gauge on how many feet and inches, meters and centimeters, or whatever it might be, from that boundary that would be the area of concern.
Have you got the drawing in front of you, Mr. Hearson?
I do, the one that's marked Woodfalls in the bottom right-hand corner.
Yes, indeed. Well, my suggestion would be that if you imagine where it says pavilion and coming out of the front, which is in the direction facing the majority of the playing field, if you progress in a northerly direction, you come to the corner of the building. And if you were to cut across there and say that at that corner of the building, that's the limit of where you can drink outside after 9:30, then that's probably as, if you go much beyond that, sorry,
up to.
yes. No, after 9:30, you'll be able to only drink in an area from that corner down to the dotted line where the drive is, and inside the building. If we're going to allow any drinking at all outside, it has to be within that area. That's what I was suggesting.
And Mrs. Kay, did you want to come back on that point?
Just thought of something else that's related, in that on the open day when I was being shown around by Simon, there's a roof terrace that's accessed from one of the bars upstairs, and he did mention that there was some potential plans to kind of make that safe and use it as an outdoor area. That might be something that needs to be considered really carefully. If that, obviously that's within the, because if we're talking about the plan, that's actually part of the building, so it's definitely going to be within the plan. This is where we really need some absolute reassurance that the after 9:30 rule, or whatever rule for outdoor drinking, you know, people may think, oh, it's going to be okay to go out for a cigarette and stand on the terrace or stand outside, and that might mean that there are groups of people standing outside for sort of longer periods till later. So I think that might need to be considered quite carefully.
Yeah, Mr. Harrison, do you?
There is an area outside between the changing rooms and what's currently being used as a storeroom, but I think was previously used as a bar. There was a broad discussion about perhaps bringing that into use as a terrace. It would fall within what we're seeking to be the licensable activities. I don't think I would object to the 9:30 rule applying to that terrace.
Sorry, can I just clarify? My understanding, Mr. Hearson, when you made your submission, was that you were proposing that outside use would cease at 9:30, that anything else after 9:30 would be inside. Is that correct?
Correct.
Yeah, that's what I thought.
Okay, so I think in that case, we can exclude the area of the drive in the front of the building, can't we? Because that's not that's not inside. That's definitely outside. So
Yes.
you would be running your line down so that it's basically just the building included.
Yes.
What about the lower terrace, so the covered area that's actually outside?
That was going to be my point, that I think we'd probably want to keep that area, although it's within the footprint of the building, for people to be able to smoke, but it is enclosed on 3 sides.
Yeah, I guess any noise from there wouldn't necessarily travel in the direction of properties.
Sorry,
But-
what did you call that place, Mr. Hissom?
I suppose the most apt description would be a porch.
Porch.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I think that's
I think
that's
as long
reasonable.
as,
So
you
that'll
know,
be the
as long as-
designated smoking area.
yeah,
It
as
is,
long as it's just a few people and you're not getting big crowds out there, because the more people you get standing out there, the louder people will talk. And then if there's music on and people are opening and closing doors, it's really well soundproof, by the way. But if doors are being opening and closed constantly, I think that it's just going to be tricky to keep under control if there are a lot of people that decide that they will join the smokers and stand outside. So in that event, you know, if that gets a little bit out of control, then, you know, we just need to be reassured that the staff will basically I don't know, just keep it reasonable.
We're not applying for a loud music license at the moment, so we're only allowed to play background music. And I can assure you that I personally supervise the decibel limits on the amps being limited to 70. So even if the staff wanted to increase the volume, it's not actually possible for them to increase the volume beyond 70 decibels.
Can I just ask, how many staff do you envisage having on duty?
That will vary with the number of people present, and we're trying to figure out that equation at the moment. Probably 2 or 3.
Right. Okay.
And there'll be committee members there the whole time, so people like yourself and Simon and, you know, each other. So it's not like you're going to get somebody saying, oh, you can't tell me what to do. You know, I feel that the atmosphere is just a very sort of friendly club, you know, and people are generally respectful of each other. So, you know, that reassures me that you don't need security.
I can't guarantee there'll be a committee member present for every moment that the bar's open, but certainly there'll be at least one of us present for the majority of the time.
Events, I guess, yeah.
Right. Has anyone else got any questions to ask from the applicant? Right. Okay. And
Sorry, Councillor Chair.
oh, sorry. Yes. Go ahead.
Yes,
Councillor.
sorry. This is very self-seeking because I'm running an inquiry at the moment in relation to community toilet provision in Merton, and so one of the things that we may well be recommending is that premises such as yourselves be approached with the request that you join the community toilet scheme, which would involve some payment from the council, and in return that you make your toilets available to the public. It's not my view isn't dependent on your answer to this question, but it would be to encourage you to consider participation in due course if you are doing
Councillor
things.
Mercer, sorry, maybe I'll step in first. We're straying into things outside licensing, 1. Laudable though they are, and 2, obviously this is a private members club effectively, so there may be an issue of access for that purpose, but Mr. Hissom, maybe you can respond anyway.
I wasn't aware of the community toilet scheme. It's certainly something we can look into. We do have community groups using it, including children's gymnastics. So we'd have to make sure that that didn't interfere with any safeguarding concerns. But in principle, I think it's something we can look at.
Good.
Thank you, and noted, Mr. Bishop.
Sorry.
Right. Does anyone else have any further questions to ask? No. And would the interested party, Mrs. Key, do you want to make any further presentations?
Or a closing statement.
Or a closing statement?
I just want to thank everybody. and you know, that Councillor Mercer, you know, for bringing some of the views that you have, or maybe that from speaking to other residents, and from my personal perspective, I don't have a problem. I did put an objection in, and I'd like to withdraw that now that I know that the late Saturday night will be earlier. So that was a contradiction in that sentence, but I think you know what I mean. Yeah, all the measures that Matthew's mentioned to me seem perfectly reasonable, and yeah, all the best. I'll be there. I'll see you for a drink. Thanks.
Right, that's good. And Mr. Hearson, would you like to make a closing statement?
No, I think I've addressed all of the concerns there are. If I can provide any reassurance, it's that this isn't going to be an events venue or a pub or anything like that. It's going to be a facility for the provision of members, by which we include members of the local community. There are some events taking place there this week, which include a small members wine tasting and that sort of thing, but all will be taking place once we get a license. But it's certainly not going to be a marquee with 400 people present and drunk people crawling up and down Taunton Avenue in the B line. That's certainly not what we have in mind.
Right. Well, thank you for that.
I'm really sorry. Can I just ask one further question?
Yes. Yes. Sure.
Apologies. It's just what date will the license be granted, or can you not say at the moment?
I'll answer. So technically, the decision is made within 5 working days of the meeting. So it would be from then, technically. Now, there might be an email notification that goes out. Sometimes there is, but I suspect that it would be when you get the decision notice that the actual license is live.
Thank you.
In the past, when we weren't doing remote hearings, it would be today after the meeting, whatever if the decision went for grant.
Thank you.
Right. Well, if no one else has any further comments to make, I'd like to thank you all for your contributions. The subcommittee will now retire for a private session, and all parties will receive a written copy of the decision notice within 5 working days, and as Mr. Bishop said, when that's been prepared. So the legal officer and the clerk will be invited also to retire with us to talk about our decision. So I'd like to thank you. Well, thank Mr. Hearson and Mrs. Kay for attending. Thank you very much for coming along. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye bye, everybody.
Bye. Thank you.